Beautiful colors and how they can kill you. We're going to talk about the hazards of historic paints, specifically about historic paints used in illuminated manuscripts. The other subtitle for this lecture is Don't Lick the Manuscripts. So to understand this, you first have to know how paint is made and how paint is used historically. So historically, you would take the paint, you would take the pigment that you would derived usually from mineral sources, there's some organic sources for them, and you grind them up on a plate, whether that is made out of porphyry or earthenware, or whether that's made from glass, or whether it's made from stone. You would grind that up, you would then mull it on that plate, and you would mix that with either egg yolk or egg white called glaire, or with gum arabic. The glaire being used earlier and was discovered earlier, egg yolk being used much more frequently later. You can also just use gum arabic and honey. You would also see it depicted used in horns or in seashells or nutshells for paint pots or something like that. No real reason other than the fact that they're just kind of the right size. So painting, you can see him here working from both horns and from shells or little dishes. This is his mortar and pestle that he's used to grinding things. The knife, which was commonly used by scribes, but also in illumination, you can use it to scrape away paint and correct mistakes. But this is actually an illuminator depicting himself. This is me painting. You can see there's a couple of phases that I'm showing here. One where all of the flat colors are laid down, and one where it's finished, where I've added highlights and areas to lighten with white, as well as outlining with black and details with black. So that brings us to our first pigment, which is lead white. It is probably the most well-known hazardous pigment because it was actually banned throughout most of the world, but it's a complex salt composed of lead carbonate, lead hydroxide. It also exists as a natural mineral called cerussite, produced traditionally by the Dutch stack method, where you take a whole bunch of lead plates and suspend them over vinegar in sealed earthenware jars, buried in horse manure as a source of carbon dioxide, but as well as a source of heat. Around 300 BC, this was described by Theophrastus of Eresos. It causes high blood pressure, joint and muscle pain, difficulties with memory or concentration, headache, abdominal pain, mood disorders, reduced sperm count, and abnormal sperm, not really a problem as a monk, miscarriage, stillbirth, or premature birth in pregnant women. So when you're talking about monastic traditions, I'm not a monk, I just play one on the YouTube, but a lot of these aren't necessarily going to be things that you see affecting them day to day, but could cause issues. The next one is Cinnabar Vermilion. It is the brilliant red that you see in tons of manuscripts. It's a mercury sulfide compound. So it was produced by alchemy, as well as being a mineable mineral called cinnabar. Known by its synthetic version was vermilion. It's also the name of the red color, known as China red as well. Mercury affects the nervous system, leads to neurological symptoms such as nervousness or anxiety, irritability, mood changes, numbness, memory problems, depression, but it also causes physical tremors. As the levels of mercury in the body rise, the symptoms get worse. Symptoms vary depending upon the person's age, exposure levels. Adults with mercury poisoning may experience other symptoms such as muscle weakness, metabolic taste in the metallic taste in the mouth, nausea, vomiting, lack of motor skills, or feeling uncoordinated. So it's a nervous system poison, basically. Changes your vision, your hearing, your speech, difficulty breathing, difficulty walking, and standing straight. So orpiment, one of my all-time favorite pigments, is just this beautiful yellow color that sparkles. So it creates these flaky, sparkly colors. So when you paint with that color, it interacts with the light better and produces more of a shimmery gold-like effect. Well, it's arsenic sulfide, and it comes from volcanic sublimations, hot springs. A person who swallowed arsenic can show signs and symptoms within 30 minutes. It causes drowsiness, headaches, confusion, severe diarrhea. If arsenic is inhaled, or a less concentrated amount has been ingested, symptoms take longer to develop, and you can have slow chronic arsenic poisoning. You start to experience convulsions, fingernail pigmentation changes. Signs and symptoms associated are severe cases of arsenic poisoning. You get a metallic taste in the mouth, garlicky breath, excess saliva, problems swallowing, blood in the urine, cramping muscles, hair loss, stomach cramps, convulsions, right? Hair loss, not really something I'm going to notice very much. Cramping muscles, maybe not. Stomach cramps, convulsions. So our next compound is lead tin yellow. Lead tin yellow was discovered in the 13th century, used as the primary yellow from the 15th to 18th century. It has a cousin, Naples yellow, which is another lead yellow compound. All of these lead compounds are significantly less toxic than the yellow that was favored before, orpiment, but less is a relative term, right? They're still very toxic lead compounds. We also have the beautiful minium, or red lead. It's still used in rust-proof primers, but it's produced by roasting litharge or lead oxide, or lead ores, and it produces lead oxide. It's insoluble in water, but it is soluble in hydrochloric acid in the stomach, and so can still cause significant lead poisoning. As we continue with our less toxic, we get malachite, which is a copper carbonate. It's a basic copper carbonate. Was one of the primary sources of copper in antiquity, but it can cause copper toxicity. Swallowing large amounts of copper can cause, again, abdominal pain, diarrhea, vomiting, yellow skin, and the whites of the eyes. You get jaundice, right? It causes liver stress. Touching large amounts of copper can cause hair to turn a different color, turn your hair green. Breathing in copper dust and fumes can cause an acute syndrome known as metal fume fever, which gives chest pains, chills, cough, fever, general headache, metallic taste in the mouth. Long-term exposure can cause lung inflammation and permanent scarring. Your body does manage a certain amount of copper, but copper is still poisonous to us. Another copper compound, verdigris, one of the oldest man-made pigments. It is a basic lead acetate. So you take copper wire, copper plates, and suspend them over vinegar, and you get just a delightful, beautiful greenish color once you mill it up. The last toxic one is iron gall ink. I use this regularly, all the time, and it's actually not that toxic, but it's still, we need iron to survive, but a certain amount of iron in the system can actually cause iron poisoning. So if you drink about a half an ounce of iron gall ink, it will require your stomach to be pumped. This is made from gum arabic, usually from the acacia tree, but gum can be sourced from stone fruit trees. Green vitriol or copperas, which is the iron salt itself. It's an iron sulfate compound. And then the iron gall tannin extract form that black pigment. So the iron and the tannic iron or gallic acid extract from the oak galls. This can also be sourced from oak leaves or oak bark or hawthorn bark. But it changes and it becomes darker and darker in air. If you have questions, post them and send them to me, and I'll see what I can do to answer them.